Welcome to byProduct Live, where we unbox everything SaaS and product. We talk with experts and leaders in SaaS and product to understand their approach to leadership and ways of working, to share their knowledge and understanding. byProduct Live is brought to you in partnership with AmSource. AmSource are a specialist talent solutions business to startup and scaling tech businesses globally. Today's episode of byProduct Live covers a topic all leaders like to think they know about, and is one of the most challenging elements of being a leader. It's the secret sauce to success across any team, and really is the difference between poor and average to good and great. Today, we're discussing team empowerment, and joining me is Jakob Thomas. Jakob is CPO at AndMake. AndMake are a group of entrepreneurs and venture builders who support companies and their teams to design, validate, and build digital products. They've worked across a whole variety of sectors and supported a number of startups to achieve funding and beyond. Jakob, welcome to the show today. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing great, Andrew. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. Looking forward to our discussion.
Yep, fantastic. So, as with these podcasts, we do dive straight into things. So, team empowerment, it feels like something we could probably ask 10 people and maybe get 10 different answers. But how would you define what team empowerment is, Jakob?
Yeah, for sure. It's hard to pinpoint, right? So for me, it's basically about granting autonomy and trust within a group.
Okay.
It's for individuals to be able to make decisions on their own and take ownership of their daily tasks, of what they do, basically. And it's about culture. And I think that's why it's also so hard to pin down, right? It's about creating a culture where there's a shared responsibility and an accountability to reach your goals. And if you share something, that always gets complicated fast. So I think one way to look at this is from the other side. What happens if you don't have team empowerment? And I think this is something that we can all understand very easily. It's basically the best idea doesn't always win. Steve Jobs put it in weak companies, politics win, in strong companies, the best ideas win. And that's, I think, the main focus there.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I guess if we don't establish team empowerment, that's going to have a direct impact on things like innovation, the enjoyment people are having, and the spirit within the team, right?
For sure, for sure. It's, I think, one of the most critical factors for success, because nowadays everything is very complicated in your workplace. Everything needs to be integrated, and you need to be able to work as a team, right?
Yeah.
And you can only do that if the team is empowered. If there's always somebody telling each and everyone what to do, if there's micromanagement, that just causes confusion.
Yeah, and I guess in the way that workplaces are now, we're in a much more remote work basis post-COVID, and I guess empowering a team has become even more important than ever.
For sure. It's about creating a connection also to your colleagues. It's very important nowadays, as you just said. Sometimes you don't even see your colleagues in person, you have never met them. And if you work together, you need to understand each other. You need to be able to communicate to each other. And that only works if you're allowed to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the places to start to dig in is actually probably what happens and the common issues when you are trying to empower teams, because that's probably where a lot of people have experienced the negative side of this. So what would you say are the common issues when trying to empower teams?
Yeah. I mean, the bigger a company gets, the more complex it is, right? So if you're thinking about hierarchy, about roles, about titles, about seniority, this can lead to one big issue, which is basically, as I said in the beginning, not the best idea wins. It's just maybe the most senior person, the idea wins. I think a good example here is, and we've all been there, I think, as soon as the CEO gets into the room, kind of the mood shifts inside the room, right?
Yeah.
And the same goes for basically each and every decision you make. If the CEO said something already, a lot of people tend to not disagree, right? And
Yeah,
this is about hierarchy. This is about roles. It can not only be with the CEO, it can be maybe you're new in the company and there's a very senior member and your first days, you're like, I don't think this is right, but you're not speaking up because there is this culture of, ah, let's let's tone it down in the beginning and let's not do a mistake. And this leads directly to the next point. It's about a failure culture. If you don't have a failure culture, if you have fear, if you have mistrust, if there's maybe even punishment inside the company if you do mistakes, this will hinder everything you do. So
yeah,
um, going back to the example of you new at the company, if you don't already have like a feeling, okay, this is a workplace where I can be myself, where I can express my ideas. And if they are wrong, somebody will simply say, no, I know this better. Maybe I'm an expert there. Let's not
yeah,
even try that. But if you don't feel this culture, this can be a big issue. One recommendation I have for specifically this topic is the book The Fearless Organization. It's really great, gives a lot of example, goes a lot into detail. What happens at the workplace when there is kind of a fear culture, and
yeah.
also how you can overcome it.
Yeah, and I guess
Um,
that's the hardest thing in any business, isn't it? Is to give people the confidence that they can make mistakes, and I guess that comes
yes.
from the leadership, right?
Well, I think it comes actually from all sides. I mean,
Yeah,
some people are just blessed with being very confident, and they don't have this issue. Myself, and I think most people, when you're in a new environment or just in general, when you're working with people, you're not confident all the time. So sometimes it's even enough if you just nudge the person to your left or right and tell them, "Hey, we talked about this in private. You had a great idea there. Speak up." So it doesn't need to be top down. It can come from all sides, I think, but I agree, top down, there needs to be at least guidelines on, okay, this is how we do things. Everybody should get heard.
yeah, and I think a term that everybody would have heard at one point or another is micromanagement, and I think
For sure.
this is a classic case, right, of the opposite of micromanagement. Team empowerment is removing that really granular leadership style.
Yes, for sure. When it comes to micromanagement, I think some people tend to do it more than others. I think what you need to remember yourself is also how you want to work yourself. It's very hard if somebody's always watching over your shoulder to focus and to do the right thing and to maybe even feel confident to think outside the box. So there, I think it's very important that you have, I think, a clarity of what your goals are, a
Yeah,
clarity of where the company wants to go. Because what happens if you don't have this, if you don't know where you're going, and in product management, we have always this shared vision that everybody talks about, right? And this is one tool you have in your toolbox to be able to avoid micromanagement. Of course, it's not enough, but if the team knows, okay, this is our vision, they are able to do and make decisions on their own because they know, okay, maybe it's not the perfect solution, but it's a step in the right direction.
yeah, yeah,
So what you need to be able to establish there is, apart from, for example, this vision, apart from maybe a roadmap, you need to have a shared understanding of what are the goals and what is the framework you're working with. Me personally, I like, for example, the GIST framework. It's basically a framework for your roadmap, I think.
okay,
It stands for goals, ideas, steps, and tasks. So it's very simple, very high level goals. Then you fill it up. What ideas do we have to reach those goals? Then you have steps below that and tasks. And this allows the team to really work independently. Maybe the goals, the team aligns with the manager, with
yeah,
whoever is responsible there. And then step by step, the more on the more operational side you come, you have more freedom, right? You have
yeah,
maybe those ideas that you can prioritize together. And after that, the manager, whoever is responsible there, they're out of the process, so to speak.
yeah,
So, and I think every company, and it doesn't really matter what framework there you use, you need to feel comfortable with this, of course. You can also simply use OKRs. It's also one way of having this framework. What is our shared goal? And then always the manager needs to take a step back and let the people cook, so to speak.
yeah,
I have one more example there. It's a very easy one, goes very quickly. It's what Amazon uses. It's the two-way versus one-way door decision. So basically all the decisions that are reversible, it's a typical two-way door decision because you can go back. If you make the button red and then you notice, red is maybe not the best color, you can make the button blue afterwards. But if you have, for example, in IT, a big architectural overhaul, you need to make big changes. This is not easily reversible. So in this case, it's better to like be sure and maybe ask the managers, ask more people, can we just do this? And these are, I think, guidelines that help the managers to let go and the workforce to be able to fill the gap that they need and want to fill.
Yeah, and I think the important thing in there is the giving people the confidence to know when to ask and when not to ask, and that obviously
exactly
enables people to feel like they are empowered to be able to make that decision.
Yes, 1000%. In the end, it's about communication. If you have a manager that doesn't use any framework, but he's just saying, do whatever you want, and that's kind of fine if the people believe him or her, right? But most of us, it's a bit more complicated, right? We all have our vision of where things need to go. And in the end, this is about communication, and it's about creating this shared and safe culture within the company. So everybody feels like, okay, I see this space, this open space where I can get creative, and I will do it because I don't fear there is like repercussions if something doesn't go wrong. Yeah. And again, going back to the example of maybe when somebody is starting at a new company, because the last issue I see here, or the last big topic I wanted to talk about is communication in general. We're all from different cultures. We're a globalized world, especially in IT. You have developers from one continent, product managers from the other, and so on. So you need to be able to have this shared communication. And I think this only goes with empathy and compassion and talking to your colleagues. Maybe also talk about non-work topics, right? Because this is where trust arises from. Maybe you have shared interests. You know about the families of your coworkers. You see they are also human, and human people, we do mistakes, right?
Yeah,
and if you have this shared understanding, if you feel safe to talk to one another, I think this is already half the work to getting to team empowerment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the hardest things to understand around things like team empowerment, because it's not a physical thing, it's about alignment and a feeling among people, is actually how do you know if your team is empowered? Because it's not a question you can go and ask, do you feel empowered? Because that almost breaks the empowerment, I think. So how do you know if a team's empowered, and is it possible to measure this?
The good news is yes, it is possible. The bad news, it's not so easy, right? Yeah. I mean, you can go by tracking very objective indicators, right? Do we reach our goals? If you, for example, have OKRs, if you have this GIST framework in place, what were the goals? Probably best to not have like a strict deadline, because again, if you have the strict deadline and then people already feel threatened, it's not really a trust environment. Of course, sometimes we're doing business, right? So sometimes deadlines need to be met, but in general, step away from the deadlines and the team will figure out how to do it the fastest way, right? And those can be measured. Did we reach our deadline? You can measure the sprint points that you're doing. How efficient are we working? Yeah. So these are all aimed at kind of figuring out, are we reaching our goals on a business side? And this can be measured. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you don't reach those goals, it's the team empowerment's fault, right? That it doesn't work. So I think this can only be one part of what you measure. The other thing is, what I always recommend every manager to do is go into the workshops that the team does. Maybe you can be the facilitator. Some people are not good at facilitating or simply don't do it, but you can maybe stand on the side and just have a look and then simply focus on simple questions. Is everybody speaking? The people who are speaking, do they get heard? Like, it's a lot of times When there's a very senior member, everybody silent,
Yeah.
waiting for them to stop speaking. If there's maybe a junior member, people talk over them, maybe just don't go into detail when they start their discussion. So this is, I think we all as humans have a very good feel for, is it working or not? So you don't necessarily need to measure those. It's good enough if you go to a couple of workshops and figure out, okay, I see it's only like the senior people talking, and the rest is kind of nodding along and saying, yes, this is a good way to do it. This is a good sign that the team is not empowered. It's a hierarchy that's empowered.
Yeah.
And on another level, you can simply also talk to the managers, right? The managers should have a good feeling of how the team works. They should know, what decisions are made by the team, what decisions he himself tells the team, I take those decisions, right?
Yes.
And those two parts go hand in hand, I think. You can also ask the team with simple questionnaires. How do you feel about this?
Yeah.
So it's not really one approach. I think all of them need to work together.
Yes.
So you get the whole picture. For smaller companies, I advise talk more, questionnaires less, right? Smaller company, you can still reach everybody. The bigger the company gets, obviously, the more important is to have those questionnaires
Yes.
to spread really the questions around.
Yeah, and I think part of that is obviously around resources that are available,
Yes.
and then how easy it is to talk to people in a smaller company versus a bigger company.
Yes. And resources is also a great point here, right? Some companies basically cannot afford a Scrum Master, some can. And if you have a Scrum Master, that's for me personally the first person to ask. If you work in a Scrum concept, because they are there for facilitating all those team meetings, they are the
Yes.
facilitators of the team. They should know. Do some people simply not speak? Do they not have ideas? Which is fine. You don't need to be like a genius and have a great idea every day. That's completely fine. But the Scrum Master most of the time has a very good sense of team empowerment. Do they need to push people to open up? Or is it more that they need to really just facilitate and guide the team in the right direction? And it's very different. And most Scrum Masters, at least experienced Scrum Masters, will be able to tell you quite intuitively and quite accurately.
And on the flip side, they need to know when to quieten down the loud people to allow everybody else to speak.
Exactly. Exactly. That's their job, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know we've taken a really quick run through team empowerment today, Jakob. I really appreciate your time. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I think people will take a lot from it. In terms of key takeaways, I think we've probably highlighted three in here. So one is that team empowerment is critical for success.
Yes, for
I
sure.
think the need to be aware of issues and the signs, both good that team empowerment's happening or actually where it's not and we're losing the battle. And then also that compassion frameworks and guidelines are absolutely key to understanding how well it's being implemented. I think that
Yes,
they're the
exactly.
three key things. So thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Thank you.